Okay. Okay. So finally, we actually get to look at this lamppost. So, this lamppost has really good, like I said, like just like basic modeling, and it looks simple, but it's not easy to do. So for instance, actually, the model that Steph sent in, the Lamborghini, had really bad like edge continuity. So unwrapping that would be like low key a nightmare. And I can explain that more later. But just the key is just like because for instance, like look at this. Like if I click this edge, I can just select loops and it'll select all of that. And that's really, really helpful because in UV unwrapping, you're selecting edges all the time. Because basically what you're doing is trying to find um, like things that should be flat and one texture and separating those. So for instance, like each of these can be its own face, right? They don't have to be connected at all. But for instance, like you don't want this part and this part to be like a different part of the texture. Like that would be so noticeable. So for instance, like all this can be one. And you're basically just trying to find things that are flat or close to flat or also get distortion. So distortion is what you're seeing here, but you'll also see it, for instance, if actually, let me actually get a different texture, um, real quick so I can show like what that looks like. Uh, Actually, I downloaded this carbon fiber texture. I think perfect. Uh, um, color. There we go. So let's say I want to use this carbon fiber texture, right? Um, Let me just. Whoops. Okay, just wait while my computer loads. Okay, there we go. No. Okay. Hello. Wait, where did my mouse go? Oh, whoops. Okay. It might be hard to show here. Let me see if I can find a way to show this. It might be impossible to show. Oh, wait, hold up. It might be hard to show here because of just how complex this is. So let me actually just start unwrapping it first, and then I'll show like things that can go wrong. I was trying to use the carbon fiber basically as a. Actually, let me just download like checkered. So like what a lot of people will do is they'll use some kind of checkered texture to basically see if their unwrapping is done well. Let me just copy this image and then oh, doesn't like that. Okay, well let me do that. Give me a sec. Save image. Okay, here we go. So a lot of people use a checkered texture or even fancier ones basically to tell whether or not their unwrapping is done well. So here it's fucking garbage. Like you can't fucking see anything. Like Z tier unwrapping right here. Whereas this, it doesn't look. Fuck, my computer is being annoying. Give it a sec. There we go. Um, Obviously the edges are fucked up, but these squares are squares. Like, that's all you need to work. Like, for instance, like, let's say that I wanted to adjust this but didn't unwrap it. Like, what you don't want is this. Like, this is distortion, right? Where like the squares are not squares. Um, so for instance, if you wanted to do this, whoops, if you want to do this, you would have to re-unwrap it. Any kind of like stuff like that. It's not hard, but that's just like an example of what it would look like if it's fucked up. So let's get back to our lamppost um, and actually unwrap this. So right off the bat, what I would do with this one is just select all the edges because it's a low poly model. If it, the reason why is because with a low poly model, almost all of the edges are things that you want to be seams. Because for instance, let's say that like you're unwrapping a face and there's geometry. There's geometry like all around. Like there's like lines here and like all these vertices here. Like most of it you don't want to unwrap. But with this, you could pretty safely say like most of it, at least the top section, you want to unwrap. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just alt middle mousing to go to different perspectives. And then if I'm going through these kinds of little like navigation things too fast, let me know. And then I'm hitting Z to go to wireframe, and then I'm actually just selecting the top part because everything else looks a little bit wonky. So I just want to select the top part, go back to solid mode, and then I'm actually also not gonna select the very top. So I'm gonna control click that to fuck. Was that? Whoops. Go back to wireframe, control click to unselect the top part because that's also not very simple. So right off the bat, I can just mark these all as seams. Whoops, I mean, do that. And then here is where if I, so let's see, I'm not sure if I did that already. So mark as seams, and then let's say that I select these. So now I can try to unwrap this, and then I'm going to go back to the UV editor, and this looks okay. So this isn't what you want, but look at all of the actual pieces. Like they're all the right shape, I guess, which is like the minimum. So let's say that you want to increase the size just so you can see the texture more. Oh, you know what? I think I'm stupid. I don't think that this is even the right. Let me go to shader editor. I think I did this right. Wait, why isn't it showing it? Oh, because I'm not in rendered mode. I'm stupid. Here we go. So rendered or material preview, you'll be able to see it. Material preview, I would say is slightly better because like, for instance, like if you have a dramatically lit scene, like this one isn't, but it's enough where it might be kind of a pain. Like seeing this shit is like kind of hard. So if you want to go to material preview, you can and see how everything, like it looks relatively okay. Like at least you have resemblance of like you're one step ahead of where you were before. There's still problems like why does this look stretched out? Like um, why is this like a different angle than this? Like that's something that you don't want. So what you do from here is you can just I'm actually gonna go back to solid mode because it's easier to see. So for instance, like this whole like this part, all of these things you can get rid of because this is one plane. So you just go to clear seam. And so see how there's no seam there? So that won't act as different parts anymore. I guess I missed this seam, which might have been why there was like distortion there. So I'm going to mark that as seam. And you can kind of just keep doing the same thing. So for instance, like, okay, this is the same thing where you have all these you have this like one plane, but it's divided into multiple pieces. So I'm just going to clear that. This is a little bit tedious, but same thing with this clear seam. Um, and we're just trying to like basically now just simplify it. So like anything that doesn't have to be a seam isn't. And I think it's better to go this way than adding, because the thing about adding is each step you do, whoops, each step you do is getting closer to unwrapping it, which can be kind of cumbersome because the first like 20 minutes will be like complete nonsense if you try to unwrap it, and it's hard to see what you've done wrong. Whereas if you just if you make everything a seam, um, like this, then you can kind of like gradually simplify it and fix things that are wrong. So I've cleared a bunch. I think I did all of them. So I'm going to again go here. Whoops. Come on. That should be okay. And then I'm going to unwrap it. So, and let's go. Actually, we don't even have to go to the UV editor because we can just see. Okay, so this actually, you can't really tell, but this is better. Like no distortion on these lines. This is all one. This is all one. So I'm just going to go back. I'm just going to select them because the problem here is that, again, we have the situation where the checker is so big that you can't even fucking see like if there's anything wrong with it. So go back, select, um, and then I'm going to go to the UV editor. So here we go. And then I'm just going to make everything bigger. That should be good. And boom, fuck. So we have another problem, which is that these are not correctly unwrapped exactly. I didn't even notice that before. So for some reason, this shape, it doesn't like that, and I'm not sure why. But I think, and like a lot of this is just troubleshooting, right? So what you could try is maybe it wants this to be like one piece. So um, let me go here. I'm gonna select these four, go to clear seam, and then go back and um, then try to unwrap it again. And then for some reason it wants to fit them all in this texture, but that's just not really what we want for this texture because it's just too big. So here we also have that problem. Fuck my life. So this is why unwrapping is such a pain, because shit like this can just go wrong. What you could do here is you could actually go in and edit this. So for instance, like, okay, why the fuck is this like swiveled around? Like, if you look at this, you don't want that. So you could do this. You just be like, okay, let me just fix that. And that helps a little bit. There's still other problems. Um, I'm actually trying to figure out why this is not working. Because I actually did, like, I unwrapped this earlier and I didn't notice, but I think it's because the texture I was using, you couldn't tell. And that's actually going to be the case like decently often, which is why actually you should use like a checkered texture. Because for instance, like if I instead went back to the chipped paint texture, like that actually looks completely fine. Like you can't tell that there's anything wrong with it. Let me actually, this still looks a little bit stupid though, because now the texture is too small. Too small. So let me just go back, select all, unwrap, go back to the UV editor. I don't know why that checkered texture is still there, but just make it a little bit. And yeah, so You can't really tell there's anything wrong with it. I guess if you really pixel peep, it's like it's a little bit wonky, but you can't really tell. So we'll just leave it as that for now. Uh, try to figure it out later. But yeah, for some reason there's something wonky there. But anyways, that's like a very simple way of just unwrapping this kind of simple object. But let's say like, what if you have um, something weirder? Like let's say you have these spheres. Like how do you figure out how to make these flat planes? The answer is you kind of can't. Like you kind of just have to like do the best you can. So in this case, I think the best you can do is um, what I'm going to explain. So I'm just selecting this. I can go to select edge loops. Did that just not work? Maybe this mesh isn't as good as I thought. Okay, so it doesn't like that. So let's say you have the situation where for some reason the select edge loops, maybe if I click 2, it'll work. Come on. Doesn't work. So let's say you want to select edge loops, but doesn't want to. This is where the fucking like 2D view thing is great because you can just do this and you can say like, fuck you, Blender. I want to do that. So and then now like that's perfect. Like that's exactly what you wanted. Thanks for the help. So what you want to do is again mark seam, do the same thing here. Side view, wireframe. Whoops. Come on. No. Uh-oh. Didn't like that. Come on. And then you can just do that. And then mark seam. So right now you have like a cup, right? But that's not going to work if you want to unwrap it. So let's just say, just let's just say for the sake of this tutorial, is you select all of these and then you go click unwrap. This is not what you want. Like this, because it's trying to interpret a three-dimensional shape as a two-dimensional shape. So you basically just need to help the computer figure that out, right? Again, same thing. So you go back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make one seam along this edge. Mark seam, go back, side view, not A, I'm stupid. Go back to face, select just these faces. Whoops, I forgot to go to wireframe. Select just these faces and unwrap. There we go. So this is finally something fucking went right. So this is like what you want, right? Because again, if I go back to material preview, this is what you want. You do not want whatever wonky ass shape you had before, right? You want, oops, you want this, right? Because this will work for basically any texture, right? Like it will work with this cracked paint texture. But for instance, like this is what it would look like before. Like what the fuck is that? Like you don't fucking want that shit. So you basically do that with everything here. So like unwrapping something that's cubic is basically just all the edges, right? Like all the like imagine this as a cube, you're just getting rid of all the edges. For anything that's cylindrical, it's the same thing, right? It's what I did above. So like let's say I want to unwrap this. This is not an exact cylinder, but it's basically the same concept, right? And that's the thing about UV unwrapping is things that are more complicated are not necessarily harder. Like, let's say I had like someone's arm or something like that, which is way more complicated looking than like this sphere. But if you use the same principles, you'll be able to do it, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm just doing the exact same thing, selecting that, shift to select all of it because I'm just like I already know what I'm doing. And then mark seam. So that's perfect. And then I guess it doesn't like the edges, the edge select. So I'm just going to select just that edge. Oh, whoops, it selected both of them. So I'm going to control select get rid of it, mark scene. So, and then I'm just going to go back to here, select all these faces. Oh, there's missing ones. Um, fuck, come on, come on, come on. Okay, there we go. So select all of those, make sure I'm in face mode, unwrap. Boom. So this one is weirder because it's like not an exact cylinder. So like, yeah, there's going to be a tiny bit of distortion. Like these are not all perfect, but you will never notice that. Like that's something that you will never notice at all. Actually, I don't know why the texture, for some reason on this model, they fucked up and the texture like overlaps. But let's just say that for the cuffs, um, guess what that's what they're called. Um, you go to the UV shader editor. So let's just say that I want the cuffs to be made out of carbon fiber. Um, I'm not going to go over like material stuff today because like there's this whole thing, but just just to like this is kind of like terrible. But I'm just gonna like just ignore what I'm doing. Uh, so let's say I want these cuffs to be carbon fiber. Again, you're like, wait a second, that doesn't look like carbon fiber. And that's because, wait, was I unwrapping this one or this one? Oh, I was unwrapping this one. And that's because the texture, again, is like the wrong size. So you just have to go back, wireframe, select all of these, go back to the UV editor, and yeah, so I think this wants to be a lot bigger. I'm actually not sure about this. Wait, what? Why isn't it like that? Um, okay, fuck this carbon fiber material. We'll just use the other one. So like, let's say, okay, and this is another Blender thing. So let's just say I am selecting these edge loop or this part, and I'm like, okay, I actually don't want this to be this cuff material. So you could just go to street light, hit assign, and it'll add the other texture to it. Um, so boom, the other texture's there. And here we can see this one again is like too fucking small. Like it's way more dense looking than it is up here, but that's something you just resize after. Like the general like the general like cohesiveness of this, or like I don't even know the right word, but like this works. So all you would have to do is, okay, so now it's too big. So you would just make it smaller, I guess. I'm just fucking eyeballing this, like it doesn't really matter right now. And boom, a lot better. Yeah, so that's basically like these are basically the same density. Actually, they're still too small. So if you wanted to like fix it really, you would make them bigger. But that's basically how you would do this entire thing is like all this is a bunch of cubes and a bunch of cylinders. Um, and then like even this too, like this looks scary, right? It's literally the same thing. Like all you would do is select these edge loops, select these, mark them as seam, and then unwrap. Um, that's basically it. And but the thing is like creating good um, unwrapping it is really important because if you're doing any kind of texture where let's say I want this texture to like have edges that are more worn than the faces, right? That's something you would do in Substance Painter, but I actually fucked with it a little bit in Substance Painter. Um, I think this is the right file. I'm just not going to save this. Okay, so I just messed with it in Substance Painter a little bit, and like let's say you wanted it to look like this, right? Where the edges are like more worn I also have this effect where things that are facing more up are more worn, as in like sun damage, whatever. Um, like this is something that if you saw it in a game or a movie, like you would not think like, oh, this is some shitty low poly model. Like, and that's like the way that a lot most like game industry stuff works, right? Is because like rendering things that are high poly is a lot more expensive than expensive as in slow than rendering like textures. Textures, normals, um, even like displacement maps, all are all cheaper than rendering um, like high polys. So, and just because this is unwrapped correctly, this thing has um, like good edge continuity, sort of. You can add these cool effects to it, right? If it was like a whole mess, you can't do anything with it, right? So let me just show you again how this looks. So, and that's like how a lot of texturing works, right? Like if you're making a model, let's say I'm using game industry again because this is like standard, but like there would be one guy to make assets, one guy to texture them, one guy to like even wrap them. If any of those like fuck up their job, it makes it super hard for the other people. So for instance, like if I wanted to add this texture where the edges are more worn, for instance, but my model was like all over the place and the edges weren't like in the right place and it was unwrapped wrong, you would not be able to do any of this. Um, and yeah, I think that's basically it. I didn't want to unwrap something like super complicated because first of all, like it would have taken longer. Also, like the concepts that I use in this one are basically like for everything. So like let me just fucking open like some random other um okay, so oh my god. Come on. Da, 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 da. Okay, so this other scene that I'm working on, right? All of these pieces are much, much more complicated. But the way that you can like the way that you unwrap them is essentially the exact same process as I just showed you. So like this piece is way more complicated, right? It has all these weird curves and stuff. But for instance, like so you see the red is where I unwrapped it. Like this part is basically just one plane, right? So I'm like, okay, I want that to be separate. I want that to be separate, that to be separate. This isn't done, but like this kind of thing will like this is almost like completely there, right? Um, so it's basically the same concepts, just used on like more complicated things. And the other thing you'll find is like the more organic your forms are, like the less you'll notice like slight imperfections. Because for instance, like these pieces aren't perfectly unwrapped, but you would never notice that because like they can't be perfectly unwrapped. So like if there's a tiny bit of texture distortion, like you can't notice that at all. Um, and that goes for like everything in this scene. Like because if like, yeah, like if you're unwrapping like some crazy like monster dragon thing, whatever, like there's no flat straight edges for you to be like, yeah, I'm gonna unfold a piece of paper right here. Like that's just not happening. Um, but that doesn't mean you like slack off. That just means that you have to solve the problem the best you can. Um, which is, I guess, kind of like the way through your unwrapping works is like it's just the best you can do, and that like that's just kind of like what you have to focus on. Like nothing is going to be perfect. Like for instance, like this lamp thing. I didn't even notice that like that one top part um, was like kind of wonky because like if you look at the rendered view, like you can't fucking tell anything. Like it looks fucking fine. Like um like obviously this one is like the simplified version, whereas like this one is like the one that I actually spent some time fixing up and like making look worn and shit like that. But yeah, I don't know. That's basically it. Like, does anyone have any questions?
When did you start blendering?
Learning Blender?
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, I think. Yeah, like end of my middle of my like pretty much exactly 2 years ago. I actually don't use Blender anymore mostly. I usually use C4D. But the other thing about unwrapping is everything will port over. So like unwrapping is the same in every program. Like the way you do it is different, but the concepts are the same. Like it's not like if you did this in C4D, it's like, oh, never mind, you don't have to unwrap anything. Like you still have to. Like, yeah.
Out of Do you have a question, Ryan? Okay. I was just gonna ask, like, thinking about the total time you spend working on stuff, what fraction of it do you think goes to UV unwrapping?
Um, it really depends on what you're making. Um, I mean, for instance, sometimes like if I'm making something like uh, let me find a file. Like some things I just don't even unwrap at all. Like I was making like this thing for VR and I just wanted everything to like look like it was made out of clay anyways. So I just didn't unwrap anything. But the thing is, like what I was saying is like it's not that much time because for instance, like if I had to model this whole thing, it would take a lot longer than what I just did, which was like 75% of the unwrapping. Like, if you had to model this, it would take a few hours or like a couple hours. I don't fucking know, like a couple hours. So like, but for instance, if you actually let me just open up the file that Steph sent because that's like a good example of what you don't want to see. Downloads. Here we go. So the way that you save time for unwrapping is just to like make your model correct because again it's like the worse you do on one part, it's like if you're animating a character and they're rigged incorrectly. Like like that will just cause you so much pain. So for instance, this model, um, as you can see, is like it looks kind of pretty, but it's like a huge mess actually in terms of like what is going on here. Like if I wanted to unwrap this, like select the right edges, like that would be like I would have to fucking zoom in here to like figure out where this edge even is, stuff like that. So like you just want to save time in all steps by doing all of them correctly, right? So like I mean you can even see like with this model, it's like the edges are fucking weird. I don't really know why, but I think this would be fine if you wanted to do like some kind of like auto viz thing because like if you just wanted to add like paint to it. But for instance, like if I wanted to add like shit. Like if I wanted to add like a let me just wait while my computer catches up. If I wanted to add like this shit to here, like it would be a fucking nightmare. Like and this is like a very simple like this should just go right away. But yeah, so yeah, you just want to save time for unwrapping by doing everything else right, I guess. Um, and then you want to unwrap it correctly so you don't waste time texturing and stuff like that, right? But it's not like depending on what your asset is. Like let's say this asset was really well optimized and like if it was really well optimized and I had to unwrap this, like it wouldn't take that long. Like it would probably take me like an hour. Even though it's like an entire car, just because like If you understand the concept, it's just like, oh, well, like fix this, like make this a seam, like make the edge of this a seam, stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be a super time-consuming process. Um, Fixing things is like, again, with the fucking stupid ass top of this lamppost, like that kind of stuff can be tricky. If you have to like physically, like what I was saying, like if you have to actually do this shit and like and like pull points around, that will be a nightmare. Like if I had to go in here, come on, and like do this and be like, fuck, where does this point have to be so that it looks okay? Like that would take forever. But like I said, like if everything works out okay, it's like a very quick process. Oh, probably.
Yeah, man, this was super helpful. Thanks for walking through all that with us. And
Yeah.
got some really cool Blender tips too. Like I didn't know you could hold Alt and then use your mouse wheel to change your views like that. Like what? That's crazy.
Yeah, I think I just figured this out by accidentally doing it because in C4D you alt middle mouse to move around. So when I went back to Blender, I was like, oh, look at this. But
Nice.
but yeah, I hope that was helpful for people and like you just gotta like practice it. It is kind of boring, but again, like things that actually let me but just for some like inspo, um, let me unshare and then like show some stuff that like give me like 5 seconds. It's really boring, but like if you oh god. Like if you do it correctly and you also like use Substance Painter or um, any like texturing software, like you can get super creative and crazy with like texturing and like um, I think that texture artists are like extremely in demand now because that's like one thing that can make 3D look super cool, right? Is like really cool textures. Like if you look at like this, let me unshare and share so I can show something. Like if you look at something like this, like most of the work in this was like creating these cool textures and like making them look real. Wait, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Like making them look realistic, I guess. And like that can be said for basically any like cool 3D project. Like let me find one more. Where is it? I didn't get rid of this project. This is like my favorite project ever. Yeah, like this is also a 3D project. Um, like this kind of stuff can only be done if like you unwrap things correctly. Stuff like that. But yeah.